the decision that changed everything. No one noticed the moment he decided to stop being weak. There was no dramatic music, no audience, no thunder in the sky. Just a man sitting alone in his room at 5:17 in the morning, staring at his phone, exhausted from a life that felt smaller than his potential. He had failed before, too many times. Failed diets, failed routines, failed promises to himself. And that was the real pain. Not that life was hard, but that he no longer trusted his own word. That morning, something snapped, not in anger, in clarity. He realized that discipline was not missing from his life. Respect for himself was. And in that silent moment, he made a brutal decision. From this day forward, he would live like a warrior, not with weapons, but with will. Chapter 2. The first ritual, waking up to death. The ancient samurai believed that every day should begin with death. Not physical death, but the death of excuses. So he adopted the same ritual. Every morning, before touching his phone, before checking the world, he whispered one sentence to himself. Today might be my last day. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt powerful. When you wake up remembering that time is limited, hesitation loses its grip. The things you avoid suddenly feel small. Fear becomes a luxury you can't afford. Some mornings he wanted to stay in bed, but then he remembered. Corpses don't hit snooze. And he stood up. That single act changed the trajectory of his days. He stopped beginning his life from comfort. He began from command. Chapter 3. The 7 seconds that separate winners from dreamers. He discovered something ruthless about the human mind. It doesn't defeat you with force. It defeats you with delay. Every time he thought about doing something hard, working out, writing, making a call, his brain tried to negotiate. Later, tomorrow. You're tired. So he created a rule. 7 seconds. If an action appeared in his mind, he had 7 seconds to move. Not to finish it, just to begin it. Shoes on. Document open. Phone in hand. Before fear could speak, he acted. Within weeks, he noticed something terrifyingly beautiful. He was no longer waiting to feel ready. He was becoming the man who moved first and thought later. Chapter 4. Becoming the walking corpse. There was a teaching from the old warriors that changed how he saw fear forever. Live as if you are already dead. When you accept death, embarrassment loses power. Failure loses power. Judgment loses power. Because what can they take from someone who has already accepted the end? He stopped protecting his image, stopped hiding his ambition, stopped apologizing for wanting more from life. When fear whispered, he answered, "I'm already dead. Do your worst." And for the first time, he felt truly alive. Chapter 5. The power of daily discomfort. Comfort had been his cage. Soft mornings, easy choices, delayed effort. So he declared war on ease. Not with extremes, but with consistency. Every day, one discomfort. Cold water at the end of the shower. 10 push-ups when he felt lazy. Silence instead of entertainment. Not to punish himself, but to remind himself who was in control. Pain became training. Resistance became rehearsal. And weakness slowly lost its voice. He wasn't becoming strong by accident. He was becoming strong by choice. Chapter 6. The pact that could not be broken. One night, he wrote a single sentence in his notebook. "I will never betray my word to myself again. Not a goal, not a wish, a pact." From that moment on, quitting was no longer an option. Not because life became easy, but because his identity changed. He was no longer a man trying to be disciplined. He was a man who kept his word. Some days hurt. Some days tested him. Some days nearly broke him. But the pact stood. And slowly, something incredible happened. People started trusting him. Opportunities appeared. Confidence grew. Not loud confidence, but quiet, dangerous confidence. The kind that doesn't beg for approval. The kind that moves in silence. Chapter 7. The Legacy of the Inner Warrior. Years later, no one remembered how many times he had failed. They only remembered who he became. A man who rose early. A man who acted fast. A man who feared nothing. A man who embraced discomfort. A man who never broke his promise to himself. He never called himself a samurai, but he lived like one. And that is how discipline is truly forged. Not in perfect conditions, not in motivation, not in comfort, but in the brutal, sacred relationship you build with yourself. Chapter 8. The Day Comfort Fought. Back discipline doesn't announce its enemies. They arrive silently, disguised as rest, reason, and realism. One morning, months after his transformation began, he woke up exhausted. Not physically, spiritually. The fire that once pushed him out of bed now flickered weakly. His body asked for mercy. His mind suggested compromise. You've done enough. Take it easy today. That was the voice of comfort trying to reclaim its territory. He sat on the edge of his bed and felt the old life calling him back. The life of excuses, of postponed greatness, of soft choices. For a moment, he almost listened. But then he remembered the pact, and he understood something terrifying. The real battle is not in the beginning. The real battle is after you've already changed. That morning, he stood up, not because he felt strong, but because he refused to become weak again. Chapter 9. The War Inside the Mind. People think discipline is about fighting the world. They're wrong. The world is easy compared to the enemy inside your skull. The voice that tells you you deserve comfort. The voice that says you've earned a break. The voice that whispers that consistency can wait. He began to observe that voice instead of obeying it. Every time resistance appeared, he treated it like a treacherous partner. Not something to escape, but something to face. When fear said, "Don't do it," he said, "Watch me." When doubt said, "You'll fail again," he said, "Then I'll fail standing." Slowly, his mind stopped arguing. It learned that excuses no longer worked. He had become a man who did not negotiate with weakness. Chapter 10. The Discipline of Silence. There was a time he wanted the world to notice his transformation, to see his struggle, to applaud his effort. But the more disciplined he became, the quieter he grew. He stopped talking about his goals, stopped announcing his plans, stopped seeking validation. Because warriors don't advertise their battles, they win them. Silence became his new armor. While others spoke about change, he practiced it. While others posted motivation, he lived it. And in that silence, his power multiplied. Chapter 11. The Test of Pain. One winter morning, sickness struck. His body burned with fever. His muscles felt like stone. Everything in him screamed for rest. This was not laziness. This was real suffering. For the first time, he faced the true question of discipline. Does the pact still stand when pain is real? He didn't train that day, but he didn't break his code either. Instead, he kept the promise in a different way. He woke up, he moved. He honored the habit of strength. Discipline was never about cruelty, it was about character. And character means doing what is right, even when the body is weak. Chapter 12. The moment he stopped needing motivation, something strange happened after months of consistency. He stopped needing motivation. There were days he felt inspired. There were days he felt empty, but his actions no longer depended on emotion. He trained when he felt good. He trained when he felt bad. He trained when he felt nothing. That was the moment he understood the ultimate truth. Motivation makes you start. Discipline makes you unstoppable. Chapter 13. When the world begins to change. The world reacts to certainty. People began to treat him differently, not because he demanded respect, but because his presence commanded it. He walked slower, spoke less, chose carefully. Opportunities appeared where before there were excuses. Doors opened where before there were walls. Not because life became easier, but because he became stronger. Chapter 14. The Final Realization. One night, standing alone, he realized something that would define the rest of his life. Discipline was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming unbreakable. Unbreakable by fear, unbreakable by comfort, unbreakable by failure, unbreakable by time. He was no longer chasing success. He was embodying it. And in that moment, he smiled. Not in pride, but in peace. Because he knew, no matter what happens from here, he will never return to the man he used to be. Chapter 15. The day he faced his old self. One evening, after years of discipline, he caught his reflection in a dark window. Not just his face, his past, the man who once made excuses, the man who once quit, the man who once waited for motivation. For a moment, he felt pity for that version of himself. Then something stronger than pity appeared: gratitude. Because if that weak man had not existed, this strong one would never have been forged. That night, he made peace with his past, not by forgiving it, but by outgrowing it. Chapter 16: When Loneliness Became Power. Discipline changed his life, but it also changed his circle. Friends drifted away, conversations became shallow, the gap between him and others grew wider. At first, loneliness felt like loss. Then he realized the truth. Solitude is the price of becoming different. While others escaped silence, he entered it. While others avoided themselves, he faced himself. And in that solitude, he discovered the deepest strength of all: self-reliance. Chapter 17. The trial of temptation. Success brings a new enemy: comfort disguised as reward. People told him, "You've earned rest now. You don't need to be so strict anymore. You've already proven yourself." And that was the most dangerous lie of all. He understood something most never do. Discipline is not built to be retired. It is built to be lived. So he refused to loosen his grip, not because he feared falling, but because he loved who he had become. Chapter 18. The moment he became a leader. Without trying, he never tried to inspire anyone. Yet people began to follow him, not with words, with observation. They watched how he woke early, how he stayed calm under pressure, how he kept his promises, how he moved with quiet certainty. And they asked him, "How did you become like this?" He never gave speeches. He gave one answer: "I stopped lying to myself." Chapter 19. The day everything fell apart. Then came the storm. A failure so heavy it shook his foundation. A loss so deep it tested his soul. For the first time in years, he stood at the edge of despair. And this time, discipline was not enough. This time, strength alone could not carry him. So he returned to the beginning. He woke up and remembered death. He acted before fear. He embraced discomfort. He stood as a walking corpse. And he honored the pact. Not because it was easy, but because this is who he was. And slowly, he rose again. Chapter 20. The final transformation. One morning, he realized something quietly. He no longer needed to prove anything. Not to the world, not to anyone. Because the greatest victory had already happened. He had conquered himself. The man who once feared effort now welcomed it. The man who once avoided pain now used it. The man who once broke promises now became one. Chapter 21. The legacy he left behind. Years later, people would talk about him in simple words. Not as a hero, not as a legend, but as something far rarer. A man who could be trusted, a man who never quit, a man who lived with honor. And those who truly understood knew the secret. He didn't change the world by force. He changed it by discipline. Because when a man becomes unbreakable, the world has no choice but to adapt. Chapter 22. The message for the one reading this. And now the story reaches you, not because it is about him, but because it is about what you can become. The warrior path is not in history books. It is in your mornings, in your decisions, in your silence, in your discomfort, in your promises. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need motivation. You don't need permission. You only need one thing: a brutal decision with yourself. Make the pact, keep the pact, and watch your life transform. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and comment.